Tibet in the region. The structure of Tibet in most Pacific Island countries is of three types: school-based, vocational education, vocational training institutions, and post-secondary technical training. Almost all countries attempt to provide some pre-vocational courses at the secondary level. Tibet is often administered by different organizations, which can lead to challenges in coordination. Several countries have natural training councils. Apprenticeship training is strong in the larger countries. Maritime training is an important specialization for the region. Private training institutions constitute an important, although largely unsurveyed, part of providing training. Religious organizations are important suppliers of training in many countries. Public financing for Tibet accounts for 2 to 4% of the public spending in education and training. Some non-public financing supports of Tibet at all levels. For the Tibet costs, financial expenditures in Tibet financing, Pacific Island countries fit into two categories in educational expenditure: those that pay mostly on their own funds and those that receive significant external funding for education and channel government funds to other activities. Countries also vary considerably in terms of the level of private and industry support to Tibet through training levies, student fees, college-based enterprises, and industry support through apprenticeships. Generally, government education financing, which we'll show you later on table 1, constitutes a substantial share of GDP, and the budget suggesting limits to sustaining support to education in the context of a growing population. Difficulties are particularly likely to arise in the absence of significant funding for small island states. Tibet expenditure is low and likely to be affected by increasing demands for primary and secondary education for a rising population. Ministries other than the Ministry of Education funding activities such as marine fisheries, colleges, and informal sector training, thereby generating additional government financing of the Tibet sector. I'm not too sure how that has come out clearly, but it shows us the funding, or where the funding comes for the Tibet sector. And on the far left there, where it says training levy, okay, this is normally 1% of, this normally comes from industry, 1% of the salary after taxes that are made to fund the training within industry. And finally, the standard outputs and monitoring. Developing standards is the first requirement for quality training. Customers and employers should play a major role in determining standards. Standards should be impressed in terms of competencies, output requirements, and not inputs. A national qualifications framework has been developed in many of the Pacific Island countries. However, there may be over-expectations and under-appreciation of the work involved in establishing new QFs, NQFs. The difficulties and dangers in NQFs should be recognized tendency to over-complexity and heavy staffing burden in establishing and maintaining NQFs. The second requirement is to identify and measure outputs and outcomes. Quality is difficult to ascertain, and in much of the Pacific Island countries, TVET, because of feedback and evaluation, are lacking to provide information about outputs and outcomes. That's all I have to present today. Thank you.